And hello. Hi, it's Kathy Frey here from IMCO, from the International Integrated Maternity Healthcare Organisation. And welcome along to this week's webinar. And very pleased to finally have here, because it's been delayed through various reasons, mostly mine, Stephanie Larson. Stephanie, say a big hello.
Hi, everyone. Really glad to be here. Thanks, Kathy, for having me.
It's so precious and wonderful to have you here, because it's been a bit of a long time coming, us getting the state coordinated, and it's what you're doing is so interesting, and we're very excited to share it. So just a little bit of an overview to those watching here today, the format. So basically, I'm going to shortly be handing over to Stephanie. She's got a short PowerPoint presentation that she's going to be going through, and then there's going to be some general discussion that we'll have, and there's plenty of time there for you to ask any questions that you may have. At the bottom of the screen will be usually on your screen should be a Q&A button. So if you've got any questions, just please put them in there, and we'll absolutely make sure we cover them off. And also there's down the bottom usually of your screen should be a chat button, and we'd love to hear from you as to whereabouts you are in the world and your role as a health professional, or maybe you are a mum expecting a baby. So we'd love to hear from you in the chat, and don't forget to click into the Q&A button if you've got any questions for Stephanie. So yeah, just a little bit of a sort of an overview of what we're talking about today. So Stephanie's going to be doing an introduction to her dancing for birth, childbirth method, and just a little bit of an overview introduction to Stephanie. So she's a really global expert on supporting women through using movement and instinct as part of their labour, and that's what she'll obviously going to be talking about more today. It's about ending the forced lithotomy position for giving birth. And for those who are not technical, lithotomy is when you're lying back and your legs are up in stirrups, and it's just it's not a natural way to be giving birth, that's for sure. Stephanie has spoken all around the world at some pretty key events talking about this topic. So we are very, very thrilled to have her here today. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Really glad to be here with you all and to talk about birth, which is so important and so close to all our hearts. So I will share my screen and we will view a few slides. Okay. So this is an intro to Dancing for Birth, a powerful evidence-based childbirth method to improve birth satisfaction. And I'm Stephanie. I'm coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. So birth satisfaction is an important measure of the quality of perinatal care, and it's pivotal in creating a positive birth and postpartum experience. So how can we maximize it? We need to give birth in a new way. So we have to change the way we think about birth and change the way we give birth. All around the world, birth is becoming over-medicalized in a lot of places. And so people are being confined to their beds, to a certain position, being forced to stay in bed, and even to give birth on their back when their body is telling them otherwise. And birthing in bed on your back causes unnecessary pain and strain. So I did create a Dancing for Birth method. And with this method, you use gravity and the biomechanics of the body to dance baby out with more ease and bliss. There's 3 parts to Dancing for Birth, and today we're really going to focus on the birth method. But as an overview, Dancing for Birth is a parent class that's for pregnant and new parents. And it's a training for perinatal professionals to learn the birth method and become certified to teach Dancing for Birth class. And it's also a birth method. The parent class is an ongoing weekly class. It's taught by certified instructors all around the world on 4 continents, and actually just added the 5th continent of South America. And the parent class is for pregnant individuals, their birth partners, and their babies. There's 3 components of the class. And the first one is prenatal and postnatal fitness, which is dance-based. The second is childbirth education. And the third is celebration and support circle. So this creates a complete childbirth preparation experience for body, mind, and spirit. Really, it's everything I was looking for when I was pregnant and couldn't find. And it has a 20-year history of effectiveness now. So I thought of it back in 1998 when I first gave birth and started teaching it in 2000. The continuing education training for professionals is a specialized training, including the philosophy and practical skills to support this method of birth. This is a photo from a trip I took to China to teach midwives and doctors and nurses. And in the training, you learn dance moves and original techniques to correct fetal malposition, avoid failure to progress, resolve shoulder dystocia, reduce labor pain, improve birth satisfaction, and reduce the cesarean birth rate, which is very high in a lot of places right now. The purpose is to naturally increase comfort and euphoria during labor, increase birth satisfaction, and empower the birthing family. The philosophy is that humans, like other mammals, have physiological birth instincts that guide us during birth, and restricting the birthing person to labor in bed or give birth in a back-lying position can have negative effects on birth experience and birth outcomes. And there are 3 principles, which are movement, gravity, and instinct. Let's dive into principle 1, which is movement. So forward-leaning maternal position encourages the anterior fetal position. And by anterior, I just mean when the baby is facing mom. Movement is an effective natural comfort measure, and movement increases pleasure in labor. So when you're in labor, you can follow what feels good in your body and find comfort, and that brings you pleasure in labor. The rhythm of movement welcomes and is in harmony with the rhythm of labor. And it helps you tune in to your body and what your body needs, what your baby needs. Maternal movement helps the baby rotate and descend. So when we are doing movements with our body, especially with the pelvis, maybe moving in circles, then we're helping the baby to rotate and descend, because birth really is a journey through the pelvis, and baby could use some help. And freedom of movement is empowering. So when you can get up and you can move around, you can follow what your body needs, then you start taking ownership of your birth and really feeling connected to that whole incredible experience that birth can be. Principle 2 is gravity. So of course, when we get upright, we are harnessing gravity to help the baby come down and out. In fact, in Dancing for Birth class, we have our moves have some fun names, and one of them is down, baby, down, helping the baby move on down. And there's less strain. So when we're working with gravity, instead of gravity neutral or even against gravity, there's less strain. The mobile pelvis can open to its fullest. And I can demonstrate with this female pelvis model that when we are on our backs, we are compressing the pelvis. So we are closing off this space in the pelvis and especially the pelvic outlet where the baby will emerge. But when we get up, we're able to let the sacrum and the coccyx move freely and open and make more space. And when we are on our feet, we avoid supine hypotensive syndrome caused by compression of the abdominal aorta. So you know that when you're pregnant, you're told not to sleep on your back, to sleep on your side to help that blood and oxygen flow to the baby. So it's a little strange that when you come to give birth, often you're told to get in the bed and lay on your back. Being up and working with gravity allows more oxygen to flow to the baby. And also changing positions is easier. So you're on your feet, you have full control of your body, and then you can change your position freely. Okay, and our third principle is instinct. We all have primal birth instincts. So even if we've never given birth before, we actually know how to give birth because it's inside of us. It's those primal instincts that date back millions of years. They actually carbon dated a fossil from 220 million years ago of what they believe to be the first placental mammal, which was a tiny little shrew-like creature. Mom and baby's birth instincts work together in synchrony. So baby has instincts and mother has instincts. An instinctive birth promotes the release of oxytocin and endorphins, which create love, euphoria, and bonding. And this is really what birth is meant to be about, not pain and strain and struggle, although some of that might exist. But it's really when we are primed to have huge peak experiences of love and euphoria so that we are bonded for life with the sweet little baby that we're giving birth to. And instinct facilitates physiological birth. So it works with all our physiological birth blueprint so that birth can proceed most optimally. This is a quote from Maternal Positions and Mobility during first stage labor. It's most common for women in both high and low income countries giving birth in facilities to labor in bed. There's no evidence that this is associated with any advantage for women or babies, although it may be more convenient for staff. Observational studies have suggested that if women lie on their backs during labor, this may have adverse effects on uterine contractions and impede progress in labor, and in some women, reduce placental blood flow. This is an illustration of an elephant giving birth on her back. So this might strike us as a little odd, right? Because we don't see elephants giving birth this way. Elephants are wild and primal creatures. They would never dream of rolling over on their back to give birth. Certainly, their body is not telling them to do that. So when we see this illustration of a woman giving birth on her back, does it seem normal to us? Because if it does, it should only seem customary, but not normal. Because humans, following our instincts, don't decide to roll over on our backs and grab our legs to give birth. We do this for other reasons, right? Because we've seen it, because maybe we think we have to. But usually it's not because that's what our body's telling us to do or that it makes it feel any better. So imagine trying to restrict an elephant to give birth on her back. It would probably require drugs and might lead to surgery. The same goes for humans. Imagine trying to restrict a woman to give birth on her back. It would probably require drugs and might lead to surgery. We see that happening a lot with lying on your back and then sometimes failure to progress and then cesarean birth. Here's a little historical context of dance. It's ancient, and it's often thought to be the first form of childbirth education, especially belly dance from the Middle East. It's been absent in birth since the medicalization of birth in the last 100 years. Suddenly, there's an influx of labor dance videos. And from my perspective, this has been 20 years of hard work of going around the world and sharing this concept. And now we see dance entering the mainstream. Dancing in labor is becoming something that people see. They see it come across in viral videos. And so we're starting to wake up to this possibility. And autonomy in birth, freedom of movement, and birth position of choice is the future of birth. And these two things are paramount. This is a myth that it's not safe for pregnant people to exercise. And this quote is from the Centers for Disease Control in the United States. Strong scientific evidence shows that the risks of moderate intensity activity done by healthy women during pregnancy are very low and do not increase the risk of low birth weight, preterm delivery, or early pregnancy loss. Some evidence suggests that physical activity may reduce the risk of pregnancy complications, such as preeclampsia, reduce the length of labor and postpartum recovery, and reduce the risk of having a cesarean section. And I'm going to share with you a labor video. So this is a Dancing for Birth student who is dancing during labor. And during this video, it's about 3 minutes long, she has 2 contractions. So see if you can even tell when she has contractions. Did you spot them? I really have a hard time even seeing when she's having her contractions. Right. This next is a different type of dancing during labor. So this is in between contractions in the corridor at the hospital.
You ain't had a contraction? No.
All right, so she had a lot of energy and was contracting about every 2 minutes at that point. I'm going to share with you some evidence on dance. And in this study, which is called The Effect of Labor Dance on Perceived Labor Pain, Birth Satisfaction, and Neonatal Outcomes, the conclusions are: the study showed a positive effect of labor dancing on the labor progress. The APGAR scores of the newborns were significantly higher, and mother's birth satisfaction was significantly higher. This study is from 2020. The effects of dance and music on pain and fear during childbirth, also a 2020 study. Conclusions: dance and music significantly reduced pain and fear during active labor. It is easy for nurses and midwives to use, affordable and effective. And it enables the woman and her partner to be actively engaged in the woman's care. And this study is from 2014. Effect of dance labor on the management of active phase labor pain and client satisfaction. Conclusions: labor dance significantly lowered pain. Labor dance significantly increased birth satisfaction. Labor dance is a complementary treatment with low risk. So here's some keys for creating a positive birth experience. We don't want to make the bed the focal point of the birth room or expect the birthing person to be in bed for the entirety of their labor. Create space to move. Empower the laboring person to follow their instincts. Encourage dancing and encourage freedom of movement. Have rungs on the wall or something to grab onto above shoulder height to hang onto for support. Offer physical support to the birthing person. Support their birth position of choice. So often we see people perhaps laboring out of bed, but then when the baby's coming, they're suddenly ushered over to the bed and then put on their back. So it's much better for the birth process to allow them to stay in the position they're already in that they've chosen and just allow the baby to then be released at that point. And then recognize the sacredness of the moment. Here's some contraindications for prenatal dance. There's unexpected vaginal bleeding, feeling dizzy or faint, shortness of breath before starting exercise, chest pain, sudden muscle weakness, and calf pain or swelling. And really, it's important for the pregnant person to really tune into their body and make sure that they are doing what feels good to them, modifying as needed, stopping if needed, and really not trying to go at a certain pace. So really controlling everything about the movement that they're doing. And concluding the slideshow, but not concluding our discussion, here are some further resources. I'm happy to share these slides. And then there are some links here to go to the parent class or the professional training and my email. So feel free to check out dancingforbirth.com for more information.
Oh, that is fabulous. It's fabulous, Stephanie. Hey, do you want to just go back on that last slide with your
Sure.
contact details? We'll just leave that up there for a few more minutes so people can note it down if they need to. That is so good. Oh, I'm just sitting here, having specialized in taking high-risk women to have low-risk births. It's just beautiful watching those women, and we got some lovely little comments through on there. You have to be, I could see when those contractions were occurring. You can have that those women, there's a little piece that comes over their faces, and that's that.
Right.
As she's dancing. And it's beautiful, beautiful to watch. I always say it's like watching the goddess come out. And when, as women are going through labor, meaning the dilatation of their cervix, that's when that goddess comes out. And once they are fully dilated and are starting the process of pushing in that second stage of birth, that's often where the warrior comes out.
Yeah, both those energies are so important, goddess and warrior.
Yeah, and you just see it on their faces. It's beautiful, beautiful to watch. So if anybody has any questions, please put them through. But we do have some other little, oh, sorry, I just need to adjust my screen here. Is there, where are we? No, sorry, I've just stuffed up with something here technically. Yes. So if you would, one of the things that, you make the comment of with regards to those birth positionings, and, really if from a obstetric medical perspective, there is absolutely never a reason for women to be lying on their backs to give birth, unless it's a C-section. They do need to be on their backs for that delivery, and unless it is an instrumentally assisted delivery. So that's a ventouse or a forceps. It's pretty difficult to do. Actually, even a ventouse doesn't always need to be on their backs, but with forceps, they do tend to need to be. And apart from that, there's absolutely no reason women need to be on their back for normal births, spontaneous births. And I noticed that you sort of, when women are feeling like they're getting forced, to be on their back, we know that's going to impact them physically, but what about also on that emotional standpoint?
Yeah. Well, I know from personal experience that it can be very traumatic to be taken from what you were doing that was working for you and suddenly moved and forced to do something different, even above your objections. And often Like there's no explanation of why. It's just, this is going to happen right now. In my case, I was lifted up and put on my back and held down by wrists and ankles, forced into that lithotomy position for no reason. And it was very traumatic. So it's not just my personal experience, but so many birthing people talk about feeling disrespected, not listened to, scared, vulnerable, disempowered, and that it can lead to, PTSD. You can have issues after the birth is over, flashbacks and daymares, like nightmares in the daytime, things like that. So you really
You're so
can't
absolutely right.
Yeah, we can't underestimate that impact.
Incredibly disempowering. And you can't, as a woman, be in really a more vulnerable position, forgetting about labor and birth, but put any woman in naked with her legs apart and the whole world to see how incredibly vulnerable that is. And you can actually see women shut down, and when they emotionally are shutting down in labor, their labor will protect them and shut down their labor. And suddenly, the contractions wane and the fetal heart rate baseline goes up. It's just, it's this instant almost cascade. It's that fight and fright and flight all hit her at once. And so one of the things that I think is perhaps a little bit of a misunderstood area sometimes is when we as birth professionals sort of talk about the birth position of choice. And sometimes I've seen situations where women have got birth plans which are really detailed right down to the birth position that they wish to give birth in. And I think one of the things we do need to remind women of is that birth position of choice was not talking about you in advance deciding the birth position. It's about your body and your baby at the time instinctively telling you the position you need to be in. Yeah. And
definitely echo that.
Yeah. So we're not talking about, for those who are not birth practitioners, but any birth practitioner will know this, but for those who are not birth practitioners who are watching, it's not about planning it in advance. It's about going with that flow at the time. And I think that midwives who, do a lot of natural birth, boy, we get into some pretty weird positions for baby catching sometimes.
Yes, exactly. You can have an idea of what position you think you're going to give birth in, and then your body has a completely different idea. But generally, those primal instincts are sending us away from bright lights, away from the bed, away from people. Sometimes we're in the corner, sometimes we're in the closet, sometimes we're in the bathroom because that seems like a private place. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So talk to us about the Dancing for Birth method as being, different to a lot of other approaches. And obviously, nearly everybody who we have on here as a speaker is, everyone's passionate about their topic. And there's always this interesting journey that how they came to be specializing in that particular field. So how did you get the idea for it? Where did that all stem from?
Well, to me right now, the idea of dancing in labor just seems like a natural, perfect pairing. It's such an obvious thing in my head, but it wasn't always like that. So for me, it started 23 years ago. I was pregnant with my oldest child. I'm a mom of 4, and I love to dance. So I was a fashion designer in New York City, designing dresses by day, and then at night, I would go out and discover all the incredible cultural music and dance that I could participate in New York City. And so I was dancing every evening and loving it. And when I got pregnant, I was actually really fortunate that I found a freestanding birth center in New York City. It was the only one. and midwives in charge there, and they didn't have any problem with me continuing to dance during pregnancy. So that was really happy for my my pregnancy progress and my labor. So when I was actually dancing the evening that I went into labor, and labored at home for maybe about an hour or two, came to the birth center, and they showed me to a room that looked a lot like a bedroom and told me, do what you want. And I actually ended up being in there all by myself. And so I was really left to my own devices, and I took them seriously. I did whatever I wanted. I didn't expect to dance during my birth, but that's just what happened. So I danced around the room, and I danced in the shower. That was really excellent, really felt good. And then it was just 4 short hours that I danced my baby out. And I remember this incredible feeling of euphoria and empowerment, and just feeling like I was so strong and so capable. And after that, I really couldn't stop thinking about birth and mothers and babies. And I joined a mom baby circle, and I just wanted to have conversations with people about their birth. And, don't you feel like superwoman? And aren't you wasn't birth such an incredible experience? And I couldn't find anyone who had anything good to say about birth. And
it's just so sad, isn't it?
In a way, it made me not want to tell my incredible happy birth story, because I didn't want to make other people feel bad. On the other hand, I wanted to help everyone feel incredible during birth like I had. So that's how I got the idea. It just came so naturally, and it seemed so natural.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. And I would have very similar situations with a lot of my clients as well, where they may be literally the only person in their coffee group who had a normal birth. And there was almost, which is a really sad situation, where I would say to them, unfortunately, things like, when you go to tell your story, there are people who may turn around and say to you, oh, you're so lucky you had that. And because for me, what I had this, and I had the induction, and I had the epidural, and I had the forceps, and that failed, and then they went to a ventouse, and then I went to the emergency section, and the baby ended up in SCBU, and blah, 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 blah. And you're so lucky you had normal. And it's not about luck, it's about birth preparation and labor education. And that just it's a shame that our culture has so commonly got to this point where women who have beautiful, natural, empowering births are almost embarrassed to talk about it, because the more common thing to do is to skate about how terrible your journey was.
Yeah.
And that is really a culture that has sort of only emerged, say in the last sort of 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. I remember my mother, who's in her 80s, saying once, there was always 3 things when she was a young mother that no woman discussed with other people. And that was their sex life, their mortgage, and their births. How funny is that? So, I mean, that's, I'm not saying that it's wrong to be talking about it now, but it's not at all. But it is just a shame that the dominant story has become the war story. And it's, it certainly doesn't need to be that way. So, and I love your comment when you say that, seeing women on their back, that image of seeing women on their backs giving birth, we see it on television depicted all the time. It may be customary, but it's not normal. I really liked your definition when you said that. And probably requires drugs and might lead to surgery. Yeah, funny that. So what would be your favorite positions that you suggest as alternatives? I mean, we know that we already talked about the fact that women should just be going with their instinct at that stage, but in your experience, what do you see are the more popular positions?
What I see people use all the time, and it's really coming from within, from their instincts, is to get up, from their back if they were there and they're allowed. I know we can't really give someone permission. You already have the permission, but getting up and then leaning forward on something or someone. So maybe it's here, maybe it's holding on to something up here. And even, tying a rebozo, a Mexican shawl, or a bed sheet, put a knot in it, put it over a door and close the door, latch it, and then you can use this to hang on to if there's nothing else. And then from here, just being really able to move your hips and do circles or swaying or bouncing. So yeah, an upright forward leaning position with your hips higher than your knees is really what I see working so well for people. And it's just spontaneous. So they haven't necessarily planned it in advance, but that's what they come to. So
yes, so right. Those leaning forward positions are what women so instinctively want to do. And this is where so often with epidurals, because they don't have that same ability to move, and they definitely don't have the same instinct on how to be moving. They're not feeling the baby in the same way. So they lie on their back, and of course gravity will take over and the baby malpositions. So it's still got its head down, but not a lot else is going right. So the back's not lining up in the correct position. The baby's not flexing the head as they need to. In fact, I remember a very holistic obstetrician saying once to me that apart from hanging a woman by her feet, having her lying on her back is pretty much the worst position she can be in.
I haven't heard that one, but
yeah. So yeah, it's just a crazy, and it's it has been, I think, adopted. Would you say that over the sort of when the male midwife, or eventually renamed the obstetrician, came through, it was kind of like about them having a good view at the end of the bed. That let's get the bed up, let's get it so that the person receiving this baby can see the view. And we don't need to be seeing in that level of clarity.
Right, exactly. Yet it's taught this way to doctors, and so there's a gap in their education because they learn from models that are arranged on the back. The illustrations are all on the back with the legs open. Most of the illustrations are just, the vagina. There's not an actual person there. It's just a vagina. And so it kind of dehumanizes it. And that's how they're learning. So they really need a different form of education. And I'm so grateful for birth professionals like you who know that birth isn't about removing a baby from a person's body. It's about supporting that person, that woman, to feel safe enough and supported enough to release her baby into the world. And you're willing to get in any position to do that, to make her comfortable.
So. Absolutely. And it was really wonderful watching those two different videos, because I think that sometimes there may be an assumption that there's sort of like this right way and wrong way to dance and or to do anything to do with labor. And what you illustrated so beautifully is, no, it's not about there being this correct dance and this incorrect dance, because you had two completely different styles going on. But what both those women were instinctively doing is being upright, being upbeat, and moving their hips. And do you think that probably is kind of like you know, at the end of the day, that's that crux.
Yeah. In the training, we do go through characteristics of the moves that make them really help facilitate labor. So there are some ones that are more helpful than others, and those things are good to know. But generally, whatever you feel coming over you that makes you want to do it during labor, that, you know, you're the expert on your own birth. So there's no right or wrong there. And I think that when people plan their music lists, they shouldn't just have dreamy lullaby, Zen-like music. They should have those things with driving beat to really help them with their energy and help them. Those drum beats can even be like what you heard in the womb. Your mother's heartbeat was your first drum beat. So how full circle to bring that back into the birth of your baby. So yeah, I think
Actually, yeah, and I'll just throw in there, if anybody wants to utilize my playlist, go for it. It's on Spotify. It's just, if you look up Mark Kathy Frey, and there's a playlist there called Childbirth Labors. And the reason that I encourage people to use that playlist, or the woman in particular, is because it's not their playlist. And what I mean is that sometimes the playlist is unpredictable. They don't know what's coming next. They didn't put it together, and it creates, and it's a very eclectic playlist, by the way, and I don't know, it's very long. It's about 16 hours long or something, so there should be plenty of time for somebody's labor. But it's great because when you put your own playlist together, sometimes what can happen is that music that you really adored before, you may not, sometimes you just feel differently about it. And so it's very eclectic. Anybody's welcome to use it. And, you know, if there's a tune that you don't like, just, you know, push the arrow and go to the next tune. But it's there anyway. Welcome resource.
I'm definitely going to check that out. Thank you.
Yeah. It's just nice when it's something that you're not familiar with, I think.
Right.
I also think it's really interesting how you made that comment that when women are utilizing dancing for birth, you know, dancing during birth, they, you know, the APGAR scores of the baby is higher, the birth satisfaction levels are significantly higher. And I would almost like to turn it on its head and sort of say that what we're talking about there, those levels of satisfaction and those good APGAR scores of the baby are what is normal. And when we have women who are having epidurals and assisted deliveries, their APGAR scores should be showing in research as being much lower, which they are, and birth satisfaction much lower. It's like, it's crazy that normal gets regarded as higher when it's actually the abnormal that should be regarded as lower. Yeah. But those birth satisfaction rates is another sort of almost, well, I think we should dig into that a little bit, that birth satisfaction, it's almost, sometimes I think it can be misunderstood that it's talking about, you know, almost like a Airbnb feedback score. You know, is that a 5 score? What was your satisfaction of that meal? What was your feedback on that accommodation? That's not what we're talking about. That birth satisfaction is, I know it's a term that gets used in research, but it's so much more than that, because when a woman has a spontaneous natural labor, which leads to a spontaneous normal birth, she's so less traumatized. Her milk arrives quicker. Her ability to feed her baby is more coordinated. The baby is more able to feed better when it hasn't had an a forceps delivery or ventouse delivery or emergency cesarean delivery for fetal distress. So the baby's in this better condition, so it feeds better. So now you've got a woman who's had a lovely birth, a well baby, a thriving baby, so her whole postpartum becomes so much lower risk for postnatal depression So this birth satisfaction, it's such an it under expresses how huge the impact is when they, not so much when the birth is normal, but the huge impact when the birth is not normal, which due to statistically its proliferance is like a new crazy normal that's not really normal at all. We are coming sort of towards the end of our time here. Is there anything else, Stephanie, that you'd like to go over, or any questions that somebody else wants to throw in just before we wind things up?
Yeah, I'm happy to open it up to any questions. And I could also relay a quick story about my fourth birth.
Please do. We love stories.
Yeah. So my fourth birth child was at home, and I was up and danced out this over 10-pound baby in an hour and 17 minutes, no drugs, no tearing, and just had this incredible euphoria. And I was in my own environment. So I was seeing things that I've seen every day before, yet they looked different. So I was looking through these same eyes, but everything around me was saturated with color, sparkling. Everything was glowing. I was glowing. I was so happy. I wish I could, bottle that. I can really kind of tap into it when I remember it. It's still with me. But yeah, if we could bottle that and give it to everyone, that would be incredible, because that's what we're supposed to feel when we give birth, is that euphoria that makes us feel so connected to ourselves and our babies, and so in love with our child and our family that we're really ready to go forward as parents.
It's that blissful birth, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And and when you say that the colors are brighter and light is lighter, we scientifically we know that's got backing on it, because we know that women get into this sort of sense of there's a photophobia during labor, which basically means that women instinctively want the lights down, because the bright lights, we are more sensitive to light. So it's not your imagination when you say things like the colors were brighter and the light was light. It is. That's exactly what's going on. And so isn't it so often that people know things instinctively and they say things and science can't back it, and science will poo-poo it, and then suddenly science catch up and go, oh, actually there's evidence on that.
Right. Now we can prove it.
Like, we've been telling you that for 10,000 years.
Right.
Oh, look, it's been so lovely having you here, and it was especially special to see those two videos, and how different they were and how the same they were.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy, so much. Such a pleasure to be here with you.
And yeah, so of course we've those that have watched this live today, you will receive an automated message tomorrow with Stephanie's from Zoom, with Stephanie's contact details again, in case you miss those. But thank you so much for those attending. It's always such a pleasure to have you here. We love our live audiences, and we wish everybody a wonderful rest of the week. And thank you, Stephanie, for taking the time to connect. And it was great that we finally managed to connect, because behind the scenes there had been some glitches. But look, it's just wonderful to have you here, and thank you for the fabulous work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.